never go out on a shoot thinking, this is the image I've got to get. I never think like that. I've got images in my mind that I'd like to get one day, but I just carry them around with me so that if I'm ever in that situation where the weather's doing something or the habitat looks the way that I had it in my mind, then that's fantastic. But you can get really frustrated and downhearted if you go just for a day shoot, or even if you're going away for a week or 2 weeks, whatever, and you've got certain images that you desperately want to get and they've got to be just so.
Welcome to the SheClicks Women in Photography podcast. I'm Angela Nicholson and I'm the founder of SheClicks, which is a community for female photographers. In these podcasts, I talk with women in the photographic industry to hear about their experiences, what drives them, and how they got to where they are now. Our guest today is Ellie Rothnie, a wildlife photographer and Canon Ambassador who first picked up a camera as a young child, but had a career in marketing before becoming a professional photographer in 2007. Today she travels the world photographing a wide range of species, but she has a particular love of Dalmatian pelicans. Hi Ellie, thank you so much for joining me on the SheClicks Women in Photography podcast today.
Thank you very much, Ange. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Now, I understand you took your first steps in photography with your dad when you were about 8 and you spent time in the garden with him photographing hedgehogs. That sounds like a really lovely introduction to photography. But how did your love of it grow from there?
I think from that point, I always describe myself as just a clicker. So I always had a camera, probably what we see is a bit of a bridge camera these days, really. And I was just always the one taking the pictures wherever I went. If somebody was pointing a camera at me, I'd run away. I'd much prefer to be on the other side of the camera. And I was just doing this for many years, basically. And then it was back in 2004, so exactly 20 years ago now. And I was in Kenya and photographing a cheetah, quite a well-known cheetah in those days called Kike, if you remember the big cat diaries at the time. And there was another photographer next to me in his own vehicle shooting on Canon. And we kind of got talking and he said, hop over. Do you want to have a go with this lens? And at that time, I'd just got my first digital camera. So I got the 300D. And so I put my camera onto this lens, which was about 840 millimeter lens.
Right.
And I looked through with this telephoto lens and this pro equipment. And I just thought, my goodness, this is just amazing. And it just fired something in my psyche, just talking to him all day. He said to me, you're really different, Ellie, because you stayed with one cheetah all day, as had he. Everybody else is coming, they take a few pictures and they leave. He said, you're different, you're just watching, you're taking the photos. And at the end of the day, he just gave me a postcard and it had his web address and this sort of thing written on there. I got home, I Googled him, and it was Paul Suders, who is a very modest but a very well-known wildlife photographer. And that was it. That just set something in my mind running. I was obviously working at the time. I had a normal office job. I worked in marketing. And I was using basically my salary to buy equipment.
Right.
And pretty much one of the first things I bought was the 500 millimeter, the Canon, the really big, heavy thing that I've still got now and I still use it now. So it just shows you, how good this kit is.
Good investment then.
Oh, it was. Yeah, really good investment. And well, they always say, don't they, put your money in glass. And I just started, using the salary I was getting from my marketing job to gradually buy a lens here, a lens there, maybe upgrading my camera body or a tripod, this sort of thing. And that was the start of the journey into serious photography.
But what really generous move by Paul to let you use his lens.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Very nice.
Yeah, amazing. And I've still got that image now, and it's a super image. And what a lovely guy, just to give up his time like that, just to sort of chat and, yeah. But as I say, I had no idea who he was at the time.
And what is it about wildlife photography that pulled you in?
I've always been an outdoor person. And in fact, my degree was in geography as a science, so natural sciences, and always just loved being outdoors, always loved animals. People joke with me I should have been a vet or something like that because I just adore animals, basically. And, you've got the passion for photography, and at some point in your life, those two come together. And hence, taking photographs of wildlife rather than landscapes or people or pets or something like that. It just happened. I didn't think about it. I just walked into this, really. It just all came quite naturally.
Yeah. You had your own marketing business and you had this sort of, boost from the photographer that you met that lent you his lens. But what was it that made you actually switch to become a professional photographer?
Well, I was basically working as a semi-professional for quite a number of years at the same time as working in an office in marketing. So if you like, I got two parallel careers going along, one that was pretty well bedded in, and then the other one that was the wildlife photography side of things. And it got to a point where I no longer had any more holidays where I could either work in wildlife photography or do any more guiding. And that was a really big tipping point for me.
Right.
And that happened around 2015. 9 years ago now. And then it was 2016 that I actually quit the office job and went full-time into wildlife photography. And my job at that point was in photography was doing a lot of guiding, photographic guiding, and that was taking me to some amazing places, really, where I could sort of provide tuition and guidance for a group of photographers. And I was being asked to write at that point for magazines, write blogs, this sort of thing. And I think just the workload built up to a point. Yeah, you reach a tipping point and you just think, hey, if I don't do it now, I never will. And that's what made me make the decision. I think it was important to leave the bridges open, because in my own mind, I left on good terms. And if I ever needed to go back, I could. And that was important, just psychologically to know that you weren't walking away from something that you'd been in for many years. And actually, you really enjoyed that job. But, it was important not to think that you'd shut the door on that and that you could go back. But really, the rest's history. I haven't looked back. I'm still in touch with all the old colleagues and this sort of thing. But I just haven't looked back, since 2016.
I think it's really nice when you can make a move like that you say is, it's a step in a direction. It's not a step away from something. It's a step to something else. There's quite a distinction, isn't there?
There is a distinction, yeah. And I think with, what I've done, I've always done the photography for myself. And I think that's a really important point, certainly for me. I wasn't taking images or going to different locations for anybody else other than myself. And it didn't put pressure on me, and it still doesn't put pressure on me. And I think this is a way that you can really develop your own creative style. If you feel the image is right for you and you feel it in your heart, it's the right thing, because there's always somebody out there who will love what you're doing.
Yeah.
And there was a wonderful quote by Steve Jobs that sort of said, if you want to please everybody in the world, you need to be an ice cream seller. And that's
yes.
and that's basically it. It's just being able to take these images for yourself and enjoy the experiences, of being outdoors and with the wildlife, because, you're lucky to see some amazing behaviours and this sort of thing, So that's always been really important to me whilst I was working in the marketing and doing the photography, and then also just going full time.
Yeah. Was there a point where you actually started to think, I am a wildlife photographer? Did you remember sort of being able to say that confidently?
Gosh, that is a really good question. Gosh, how do I answer that? Well, yes, because you are being asked to write or you're being asked to video, for example, and, there's your name and underneath it says wildlife photographer. But, you still pinch yourself. every day because you are doing something that you love. There is always luck in life, isn't there? And you can create some of that luck as well, but you do need things to be rolling your way, I think.
Absolutely.
I am a wildlife photographer, but yes, you don't necessarily see yourself as that. I think naturally as photographers, we can sometimes beat ourselves up a little bit, can't we?
Yes.
And I think they call it imposter syndrome these days, don't they? That you're in a position and you're thinking, gosh, right, okay, that's amazing.
It does strike me sometimes people say to me, oh, I'm a whatever photographer, but no, we don't need the but. That's what you photograph. That's what you enjoy. You're a photographer. So let's just leave it there.
Yeah, there's no but.
Did you feel any different when you went on your first trip where you were, a full-time wildlife photographer?
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, because there was a sense of achievement, really, that you'd actually done it. And I think that was the biggest thing, because in your mind, you're always thinking, gosh, shall I or shan't I? And maybe I'll know the right time to do this. And then when I actually did it, yeah, I was just really happy. I felt that I'd achieved what I'd really wanted to do.
Fantastic. I think one of the nice things about making a career change like that is that loads of people support you in it. They're really happy that you're doing something that you really want to do, and they want to know how it's going, and they're really pleased to hear that you're enjoying yourself and making progress. It's a really nice thing for everybody, actually.
Yes, it is. It is. And I, there's a shared love, isn't there? Especially, for example, with SheClicks, because everybody in that forum has a love and a passion for photography, and they love being, with their camera, whether that's outdoors or in a studio, depending on what genre they're enjoying. So, I think photography is just a great leveler in that respect, because there is that passion, and everybody just really enjoys what they're doing, And of course, then there's always maybe the tech talk, or there's always something in common if something's not working, or there's a certain technique or this sort of thing. So, yeah, there is a big shared love. And I think this is where social media has had a big positive impact on the photography industry, because it has brought a lot of people from so many different backgrounds together from around the world. So if you want to chat to somebody in America or Australia or the Arctic, for example, there'll always be somebody in a forum that you can have a discussion with about something in particular. So, I think that's one of the big positives of how social media's sort of helped the industry.
I was going to ask you, how important is social media to your business, would you say?
It's important, yeah. I'm sort of a generation where, even in my 20s, I didn't have a mobile phone because they didn't really exist. So, we're in such a tech revolution now, basically. I think probably the younger generation understand all the nuances of social media far, far better than I do. But from my perspective, yeah, it's very important. I don't like to spend too long out there, to be honest with you. So I'd prefer to be out there with my camera and just doing little updates and this sort of thing. But I do think it certainly raised the profile of many photographers. And as I say, allowed photographers to connect as well with something that they share. In this day and age, yeah, it's an important communication tool that we have.
Yeah. I think there's a tendency to feel like you should be on every platform.
Yes.
But it's easier and perhaps better, I think, to concentrate on one or two. So maybe on Facebook or Instagram, particularly if you're a photographer. Is that the approach you've adopted?
It is. I agree.
You're not on TikTok then?
Well, it was suggested a few weeks ago and I just laughed. I thought, no, that's not one for me. But yeah, I focus on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm also on LinkedIn. But that's probably from the old sort of corporate days, basically. But it still is a good platform for meeting other photographers. But without a doubt, Facebook, I find, is far easier to engage with other people. And Instagram is just good for sort of showing your portfolio, basically. So those are the two that I focus on. No YouTube, not yet.
No, okay. How do you decide where to go and what to photograph?
Oh, wow. Well, I think as a photographer, you always have a wish list. And sometimes that wish list can sit there for many years, So in part, it's the trips that I'm leading that takes me to those locations and those species. But I do have my favourites. So I'll go back to a location year after year after year, in fact, several times every year. And I never get bored of that. That's my approach. That's how I do it, because I like to learn the location. I like to learn about the species. And every single time that I go back, the conditions are different, the weather's different, the behaviour's different. I might be using a different lens. I'll always come away with different images. But, you understand the behaviour. So you know that if the bird does something particularly with its wing, you know what's going to happen. It's going to put its wings up and then it's going to take flight. And they're often the best images, to take rather than it just being like a sitting duck, basically. So I just have my favourite species and the locations drive where I'm going to photograph them. So I've got a love for Dalmatian pelicans. I've been going out to that one location for more than 10 years now, mainly in the winter, but I go in the spring and the summer, and I'm just documenting the story of those pelicans because it is a conservation success. And as a species around the world, it's declining like so many now. But in one particular small part of Greece, there's a local initiative where they're building breeding platforms, and it means that the breeding is pretty successful every year because of that. And so the population on that particular lake is actually increasing. And I've been documenting that now for more than 10 years. So there's a book to tell the story because it's not just about this amazing and beautiful looking pelican. It's the story behind it and how threatened it is elsewhere. But in this one small part of the earth, it's doing all right.
Brilliant.
Again, northern gannets. I adore photographing northern gannets. That's been a passion for 15 years with me now. And I'll go back to the same locations every single year and photograph them. And hence the trips follow with that. So I think if, a lot of pros would probably say they've all got their favourites. And that very much drives, what they do.
We'll be right back after this short break. Please excuse this interruption. This podcast is supported by Canon, a leading technology company founded in Japan in 1937. Canon is dedicated to helping people reimagine and push the boundaries of what is possible through imaging. Canon believes in living and working together for the common good to develop a better society and a more inclusive and equitable world. Let's get back to the episode. Yeah. What is it about the pelicans that you like so much?
Well, I just think they look, they're just funny looking, aren't they? But stunningly beautiful birds. Again, it was an image that I saw, and that must have been about 15 years ago, from it's Lake Bikini, and nobody'd really seen the Dalmatian pelican before. And I saw this image because it had won something in a competition, and I thought, my goodness, look at these, aren't they amazing, And then I just started working on how to get there. It was one of those species on my list, if you like. So, and I think initially when I saw them, I just thought, yeah, they look kooky. They've got these amazing breeding feathers that they have in the winter. They've also got this beautiful red bill at maturity in the winter. So this is the breeding colours that they have. And all in all, just, I don't know, I adore them. I've just got this passion for them. And from probably seeing a photograph, about 15 years ago, and I never get bored of them. And, I'm often asked, do you not get, a bit fed up with going back to a location again and again and photographing the same bird? And it's like, I'm never bored. Can't wait to get back.
Yeah, that's good. You mentioned sometimes, the conditions aren't right, the animal doesn't turn up, the light doesn't come good. How do you deal with that frustration of a wasted day or wasted few hours? Do you see it as part of the process and just sort of take it on board, use it as sort of a mindful few hours sat there in nature, or do you get frustrated?
Never frustrated. I don't see it like that. And I never go out on a shoot thinking, this is the image I've got to get. I never think like that. I've got images in my mind that I'd like to get one day, but I just carry them around with me so that if I'm ever in that situation where the weather's doing something or the habitat looks the way that I had it in my mind, then that's fantastic. But you can get really frustrated and downhearted if you go just for a day shoot, or even if you're going away for a week or 2 weeks, whatever, and you've got certain images that you desperately want to get and they've got to be just so, because I can guarantee you'll frustrate yourself with that approach. So just enjoy it for what it is. Enjoy being out there. Sometimes I don't even take any photographs, Andrea. I just watch. And again, that's a great way of learning, about the species. And then something else might happen that you weren't expecting, or a different animal turns up that, again, you weren't expecting. So often if you go out with an open mind, you can enjoy the unexpected. And if the weather's a little challenging, rain, snow, mist, fog, you name it, great, embrace it, because they're often the best images. And it was actually in snow and fog that I taught myself the high key technique. And initially, my images weren't really working as I had them again in my mind. I wanted that sort of purity and whiteness and the negative space and this sort of thing. And just embracing a foggy situation with Gannet, fantastic. Great high key. And that's how I see bad weather these days, is just go out there and see what happens. Actually, sunny days are the worst for wildlife photographers. So, that's right. Absolutely. Apart from the golden hours either side, they're ideal. But yeah, a sunny day is the worst day, really.
Yes, very harsh light, strong shadows. Now, you've mentioned research a couple of times. How much of your time is spent researching, as in looking at books or reading on the internet, actual research in an office or in your home, rather than out shooting?
Again, that's a good question to try and put a figure on it. You tend to be researching even if you're on a plane going somewhere. I read a lot of natural history books, so you could probably say that that's researching too. I do Google something if I'm unsure or if I'm curious about something. But I'm a big reader, so how can you put a figure on that? Yeah, maybe 20% something, and then the rest of the time is observing when you're out there. It's more about watching the wildlife.
Yeah, seeing the behaviours.
Yes.
Are there any animals that you haven't photographed yet that you'd like to?
Do you know, polar bear?
Oh, wow, yes.
That's quite a common answer, I imagine, certainly these days. But yeah, I'd really like to go to the Arctic, Svalbard, and photograph the polar bear. But I'm happy with all animals, really. But that is one on my list that I would love to do. And I'd love to go to the Galapagos one day. And again, I hear different reports back from that, but it's only because of reading about Darwin when I was a kid. And I just want to go.
Oh, right, yes.
Those are the two really on my wish list.
Oh, I look forward to seeing them pop up on your Instagram feed at some point. Now, you're a Canon ambassador now. How did that come around?
I've just been doing what I'm doing, and they approached me and asked me to apply.
Okay.
So again, that's the strength of social media and having a website, and just putting your images out there. It's interesting because I often feel uncomfortable talking myself up, if this makes sense. Maybe this is a female thing, I don't know. But, I like to think that I'm modest in my approach. But I still think it's important that the images say who you are, and the images need to speak for themselves and stand up on their own 2 feet. Hence the importance of having those communication channels to the outside world. That's the best way through your images to tell people what you are, what you do, what your style is, and a little bit more about you, really. Yeah, so they approached me and invited me to apply for this. And I'll be honest with you, I kept saying, I won't get this, but I'll go. I was so happy to be invited to apply and to have a sponsor for this. And yeah, I was successful with that. So I'm so happy about that recognition, because if you'd asked me one day, would you like to be a Canon ambassador? I'd say, oh yeah, of course I would, my goodness, but that's one of my wildest dreams, that one. So when you are successful with that, yes, it is amazing, yeah. So I'm very happy, yeah. And Canon are a fantastic company. You know, I've used Canon since, well, those days when I was little with my dad. I've always been a Canon photographer, and their kit has got me through extreme weather, left, right and centre. It's never let me down. And just still using an old 500mm Mark 1, but still now as sharp and as incredible as it was the day I bought it. I think that's just testimony to who Canon are.
And are you using that lens on an SLR still, or are you using it via an adapter on a mirrorless camera?
I'm still a little bit of both. So I'm still using a DSLR, and within the last year now, I have got some mirrorless equipment as well. So I tend to use both for different situations, really. But I do really love the mirrorless system and just the weight. I mean, gosh. And I know that's what a lot of my guests say with any of the mirrorless systems. You know, it's a lot of the decision for them to go mirrorless was just down to the weight. Yeah, it's exactly the same with the Canon equipment.
I imagine that the eye detection autofocus must be very useful for you as well.
It is, yes, it is. The animal tracking and the eye detection, I use those a lot. And there are different ways that you can just tweak within the camera as well. And what I love as well is just all the different recall functions that I've now got set up. So it's a lot quicker. You can be a lot more responsive as a photographer when the animal shows a certain behaviour. Whereas perhaps, using my older cameras, I probably could get an image and then I might have missed an image. But the whole AF system now in the mirrorless cameras is incredible. It's a game changer, really.
That's a phrase that's used quite a lot, but I think it's very true when you're talking about subject detection.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Well, I think it's a good time to go to 6 from SheClicks. I've got 10 questions from SheClickers, and I would like you to answer 6 of them, please, by picking numbers from 1 to 10. So if you'd like to give me your first number.
Okay, 7.
Number 7. Now, this is from Philippa. She says, do you have any advice about getting published?
What I would suggest is networks and contacts. So is this published in a magazine or published as a book?
I think probably in a magazine.
I would recommend getting to know who those editors are. So targeting where you would like to be published in terms of your images and your writing, and get to know those editors. Even at some of the shows, a lot of the editors will be there, and you can actually just go and shake their hand and introduce yourself and give them a card with your website. The other advice I'd give as well is about image curation. So think about how you want to be perceived when somebody looks at your website or looks at your social media feeds, and put those images online that, if you like, you want to be known for. So that might be developing a particular style. For example, with myself, I'm known a lot for high-key and low-key photography and the foregrounds and the backgrounds. But that doesn't mean to say I don't do a lot of action shot and images of lions eating a wildebeest, that sort of thing. I just don't really publish those a lot, but I still take those a lot. So I've always thought carefully about what I actually put out into the public domain. And that would be another part of my advice, really, is just how you're representing yourself, for example, on your website, so that when the editor then goes onto your website and looks at those images, they think, oh my goodness, yeah, that's amazing. And then hopefully then that will open doors to get published.
I think that sounds like great advice. You mentioned shows. Do you mean specifically shows around wildlife or photography?
Yes, both. Yes, so something like the bird show or like the photography show, for example, any of those specialist shows. Of course, according to the genre that she's in, if for example, she wants to be published for her wedding photography, for example, go, target the wedding shows where those editors might be. But also just write to them. They're often watching what people are doing on social media again, and it's so easy now to get in touch. I think it's just getting yourself in front of them, and then hopefully there'll be success from that.
Great. Could I have a second number, please?
Let's have number 1.
Number 1. Okay, this question is from Penny. She says, some of your photographs appear to be taken at very close range and at eye level, for example, when facing a large lion. Have there ever been times where you were fearful when photographing these amazing animals, or have things ever not gone to plan in the wild?
Oh gosh, that's a good one. Have I ever been fearful? Sometimes it's healthy to have a certain element of fear, because then that shows that you have respect for that animal. And one occasion, probably about 18 months ago, I was just lying on a beach in Alaska with the grizzly bears walking past. They're not too far away. And you realise that you're in quite a vulnerable position because you're lying down on the sand and with your camera.
Right.
It's just watching them and having that respect for them and having that certain element of fear. And that can really happen in any situation.
Yes.
I will say that I use long lenses a lot. So, for example, if there's a lion that looks quite close, there's a good chance that I photograph that lion on, for example, a 500mm lens. So, but often I'll try and get low down. So that is a good point that she spotted, is that I'm at a low level. With a lion and other species like that, clearly you can't get out the vehicle. That's a really unsafe situation, more importantly for the animal as well as for yourself. But you can be in adapted vehicles like photo vehicles where you can lie down on the floor of the vehicle. And then obviously then if the species is just a little bit farther away, you're taking that with a 500mm, you've got that, you're shooting right across the ground basically. What else? Elephants. I've been lying under a vehicle with elephants walking past. Again, it gets the adrenaline going a little bit. But that was the most amazing experience because they were very comfortable. They didn't actually know I was there, making no noise, not moving. They can just see a vehicle. But they were rumbling. They were communicating to each other as they were walking past. And I felt the rumbling in my chest. And that is something I'll never, ever forget, that communication. I felt it too.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So I think there's always a lot of common sense. The main thing with wildlife photography is you never make that animal uncomfortable, fearful, anxious. They're the main goals when you're out and photographing. So, but there are situations, where you can work it.
I have been lucky enough to go on a safari, and there's one where some cheetahs just kept getting closer and closer and closer, and they're like the cubs were all playing around the tyres of the vehicle, and you're thinking, well, your mum might not be happy about that. We're just staying there, but you can't stop them getting closer. Well, I suppose you can, because you can put the car into reverse, but there's a tendency not to do that.
Yes, yeah, that's right. I mean, what they tend to do is perhaps just start the engine, just to deter for example, the cheetah from certainly jumping onto the vehicle, which is often bad news for the cheetah. They can break their legs when they jump down, for example, which is the end of that animal's life. So the local guides that you work with should very much be responsible in that respect as well.
So could I have your third number, please?
Okay, let's go for number 9.
Number 9. Oh, now this is a really interesting one.
Okay.
What is the biggest mistake you see people make in wildlife photography? And is there a mistake that you've made that you'd be willing to share? That's from Liz.
Oh my gosh. Biggest mistake in wildlife photography. I guess that there are many, aren't there, really? I think we all live and learn on that one, to be honest. But the biggest mistake I see, I guess it depends if that's out in the field or whether that is actually the way that somebody's approaching their photography. But if it's in terms of how somebody's approaching the image itself, the biggest mistake is I'd say around backgrounds and foregrounds and composition, because just maybe a slight movement to the left or to the right, or maybe down a little bit, would have improved that image and made a good image into a great image. So that photographer might have been in an incredible situation with an animal, but perhaps the image didn't work as well as it could have done. I think out in the field, noise and sudden movement, because often photography can be quite a social event as well, but it's always just a good thing just to keep the noise levels down, and certainly not to be moving and running and shouting and this sort of thing, because that might just distress the animal or make them fly, and it ruins it for everybody. I can think of one time, and this was many years ago. I was over in America and I was photographing snow geese, and it was early in the morning, and there are about 40,000 snow geese that are just congregated, and you're waiting for what's called the blast off. So basically, as the sun rises, they all take to the air at the same time. And I was in a hire car, and the hire car was locked and walked away, with some people to photograph these geese and wait for this blast off. And the alarm of the hire car just went off. You couldn't make it up.
Wow.
And so the geese just took to the air, I mean, so there you go. I'm really sharing one of my experiences. Well, it's not really, because there was nothing you could do about it. The alarm just randomly went off, spooked the snow geese, and into the air they went.
Oh, wow.
And you're sort of walking away with your head in your hands like this,
Oh, dear.
But hey, these things happen.
I guess they do, yes. So, can I have your fourth number, please?
Let's go for number 5.
Number 5. Now this is from Philippa. I've been looking at your Dalmatian Pelican gallery on your website. She was there a few years ago and it was very cold, but not as iced up as when you were there. How do you prepare for extreme cold conditions for you and your gear? And do you have any particular advice to share on that?
The most important thing is clothing, because there's nothing worse than being cold and feeling the cold. And in fact, it can be quite a dangerous situation as well, in terms of hypothermia. So lots of layers. And then I wear a really big sort of quilted coat over the top of all those layers. So that's the main thing I'd say in any cold environment, is just dress appropriately, down to winter boots where the soles are much thicker and they raise the soles of your feet from the ground, so you're not feeling that. So heat pads, all that sort of thing. I use all of this when I'm in a cold environment. And Yellowstone in winter, Japan in winter. Yeah, I mean, even that time at Lake Bikini with the pelicans, that was -15, and that's quite unheard of in that part of the world, really. So whereas Japan can go to -30, -35, something like that.
Wow.
So primarily look after yourself. It's all about clothing, and also have hot drinks with you. It sounds like common sense, really, doesn't it? Even chocolate, sugar, anything that you can just go for, if needed. In terms of my kit, I tend to use the neoprene covers on the lenses just to give them a bit of protection, and also around the camera and the tripod as well. Especially tripods need a bit of looking after because they're standing in snow or on ice, this sort of thing. So I've always found that those covers give a good degree of protection, basically. Keep spare batteries in pockets just so they don't drain their life. It's the usual stuff, really, but I've never had a camera or a lens fail in those extreme environments. The other thing as well is I just do use a sort of a double-lined dust bag in a cold situation as well. It can just give some protection, certainly on the lens, whether it's snowing or it's hail or it's just generally really cold. And it also provides a bit of protection for your hands too. So layer yourself and layer your equipment would be my advice.
Do you have any particular glove or mitten recommendations?
No, not really, no. I actually use a ski glove. It's a mitten, but you can take your fingers out of the mitten. Your thumb's free and then your fingers are in another lining. So that's what I used in that situation. But there are many out there that specialise in this, but no particular recommendation on that one. But I do use the hand warmers. They're really good.
Okay, yeah, they are very useful. Right, could I have your penultimate number, please?
Number 10.
What criteria do you use to decide between colour and black and white photos when creating a wildlife photo? Is the black and white option selected in post-processing? That question is from Rachel.
Well, that's a great question, Rachel. There are certain situations and images or the way you know that they're going to work well in black and white. So you've got contrast or the animal has a strong pattern. For example, like the giraffe, or a leopard, for example, or some birds. But you can see that actually in that image, you've got a good range of whites to black, and it can be quite contrasty. When I'm out in the field, I'm actually taking those images in full colour, and I will do that conversion in post-processing. However, I would say that my style is predominantly colour, because I guess that's just how I see the world. It's a colourful place. So most of the work that I do, I keep it in colour, and basically in my post-processing, I'm getting that raw file back to how I remember it in the field. My processing itself probably takes about 10 minutes per image. I do very little really to those images. The key is just getting it right in camera. And as I say, most of what I do is colour. But yeah, absolutely, you're right. There are certain times when you can see something with the pattern, with the contrast, where you think that's, or structurally, there's something structurally beautiful about it, that's going to work very well in black and white. Another example I have is a Barbary macaque was just sitting on top of a spiral staircase. So you can imagine the staircase goes up and the macaque's sitting right at the top, and you're taking that against quite a cloudy sky. So it was naturally a high key image. But in my mind, when I was taking that, I was thinking black and white for that image. So you just tend to see it as you're going around and you're in different situations.
If you, in that situation where you decide this is going to be great in black and white, does it make you handle the exposure in any different way at all?
Generally, I'm probably brightening that image a little bit, because in my mind, it is going to be against, for example, quite a grey sky, or it might be against snow, and it's something where you think this is going to work in black and white, so I brighten it. So I go into a high key approach with that image, and then processing is very minimal because you've done it in camera. So yes, I think if you see it, you think this is going to be black and white when I get home. You do shoot a little bit differently, yeah.
Right, so your final number, please.
We haven't had number 6, have we?
No, you haven't on number 6, right. Number 6. This is from Paula. You have photographs from and tours to varied parts of the world. How do you balance the desire to capture and document these animals in their environments with the inevitable carbon footprint this travelling involves?
That's an important one. I mean, in terms of the flights I take, I do offset those flights. With anything, whenever you're getting in a car or you're getting on an aeroplane, you're going to have some form of carbon footprint. And that absolutely is always in your mind. I do a lot of travelling, and I guess the way I rationalise that is that I just want to share that passion and that love of those animals with other people and tell those stories, whilst also offsetting or trying to offset as best as I can with what I'm doing. And that's really how I approach it. But there's no perfect solution. But a very good question. And I'd say most photographers who do travel will be very mindful of their carbon footprints.
Yeah. Well, Ellie, thank you so much for answering all of those questions. It's been absolutely fascinating hearing from you.
Thank you, Angela. I just want to thank you and everybody at SheClicks for inviting me for the podcast. It'd be nice to see you all one day.
That would be lovely. Well, thank you very much.
And I think whatever we can do to encourage more women into the industry and certainly into wildlife photography, that would be just great.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the SheClicks Women in Photography podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. You'll find links to Ellie's website and social media channels in the show notes. I'll be back with another episode soon, so please subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform and tell all your friends and followers about it. You'll also find SheClicks on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube if you search for SheClicks Net. So until next time, enjoy your photography.